Hi, Keith here. The Rebel Civics show on the Unsafe Space Network is an education and discussion show on the principles of government, society, and individual rights. Today, I'm going to talk about the demands for federal gun control following the school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, and the demands for the repeal of the Second Amendment, as if that's going to solve the problem. So I want to start with talk a bit about the timeline. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the shooting itself. Lots of people are covering that. But I just want to go through what happened here. In Uvalde, Texas, around 11:30 in the morning, after following a car crash, apparently he was being chased by the police. A guy got out of the car with or truck with a gun, two guns, AR-15 style. At 11:30, somebody called in, a teacher called that somebody with a gun was on school property. He goes in the building after about 10 minutes outside. Within a few minutes, the police arrive. Here's the timeline here. The first call was 11:30. 11:31, he's in the parking lot. 11:33, it enters school. 11:35, the police enter the school. 3 cops at first. He fired rounds. They started posting on Facebook because you certainly got to get it out on Facebook as fast as possible. They also got it out on Twitter within a few minutes. By 11:44, more police officers aside, more arrive. There was a minimal engagement with the shooter. One of the officers got grazed, so they backed away. People started filming. By noon, there was somewhere in the neighborhood of 19 officers inside the school's hallway while the shooter was in a room killing kids. Over the next half hour, 45 minutes, the shooter continues. The police didn't engage him. Apparently, they had trouble getting in a door. They were resisting parents from going in. They, including arresting and tasing parents who were going to go in and do something. At 12:15, a Border Patrol tactical unit arrives. The police stopped the Border Patrol tactical unit from going in right away. Eventually, the Border Patrol ignored the police who were in charge of the scene. They went in anyway, and somewhere around 12:50, the Border Patrol kills the gunman. That's an hour and 20 minutes after he went in. That's mind-boggling that you'd take that long with an active shooter situation. Throughout that time, kids actually in the classroom with the shooter are calling in, trying to get people to come in. Here's a Reason article. They talked about 45 minutes. These times were varied in the reports because the police were lying. So the so-called first responders here. We're talking an hour and 20 minutes. That's a long time to leave an active shooter case. There were 19 officers in there. There were plenty of officers to do whatever needed to be done, with one exception. The incident commander believed they needed more equipment and more officers to do a tactical breach. This is incredible. It's as they say here, it's sickening. There are children who were bleeding for a long period of time. One example I saw where she basically bled out. She died, an hour after being shot in the hospital because it took so long for them to get in. Okay, that's all I want to talk about as far as the incident. Probably most of you have heard about it. So what do we hear? 2 seconds after this happens, actually before they even got the shooter, people already started talking about, we need more federal gun control. Congress has to do something. We need an assault weapon ban. We need rifles, should be illegal. He shouldn't have had a gun. They blame the gun, as typical. This is from a little while ago, but Biden calling for a ban on so-called assault weapons. Biden took a common sense steps. He vowed to take common sense steps on firearms, renewed a call for ban assault weapons, ban high capacity magazines, as if the high capacity magazines and the style weapon were the problem. If you have an hour and 20 minutes to shoot up a classroom, it doesn't matter how many rounds per minute the gun can shoot, or how long it takes to reload, or how many rounds are in one magazine. Not that this really matters for my point, but these reactions about banning a particular type of gun are ludicrous. They're not going to solve the problem this way. Also, Vice President Kamala Harris has also called for the same thing. I'm just going to read a quote here. This is in an article about Biden. Yesterday, Biden went to Texas Sunday to offer his condolences to the families. Here's a quote. This was from Vice President Kamala Harris after the Buffalo shooting fairly recently, mass shooting in a supermarket in Buffalo, New York. "We are not sitting around waiting to figure out what the solution is. You know, we're not looking for a vaccine." Actually, maybe they should. This looks like it might have been a mental problem, but I don't know if you can vaccinate them to solve it. But "We know what works on this," Harris told reporters near Air Force One, adding, "Let's have an assault weapons ban." You know what an assault weapon is? You know how an assault weapon was designed? It was designed for a specific purpose, to kill a lot of human beings quickly. An assault weapon is a weapon of war with no place in a civil society, she said. Well, it is actually designed to kill people. That part's true. As far as a weapon of war, well, okay. Certain rifles are designed for war, although they're very difficult to buy in the United States, and he didn't use a military-grade rifle. As far as no place in a civil society, that's what I'm going to get into here. What is actually the point of citizens having and not being infringed on the right to keep and bear arms? I want to just note that Kamala Harris made those comments about Buffalo in one of the states with the strictest gun control in the US. Like, how did he even get in there? Pretty much everywhere is a gun-free zone. It's very difficult to get a carry permit. If you have a carry permit from another state, you're not allowed to use it. If you have a gun in a car, it's got to be locked up with no ammo in it. And in New York, the ammo has to be in a separate hard-sided locked container. So if laws fix this problem, I'm not sure what Kamala is talking about it, because she's in a place that has super strict laws. The whole concept is ridiculous. They brought up the federal assault weapons ban. There's another funny one. That was something that former Senator Joe Biden had a big hand in getting passed in 1994. That was in place for 10 years. There's a federal ban on so-called assault weapons, assault rifles, which included the firearm that was used in Uvalde, Texas. It had no measurable effect on violence committed with guns, had no measurable effect on different types of guns. After 10 years, it was dropped because it was impossible to argue that it did anything. Recently, Nancy Pelosi's calling for it again. Joe Biden's calling for it again. Kamala Harris and lots of people on Twitter and Facebook this week are demanding that black guns be banned. Here's my shirt as far as what I think about that. Black guns matter, folks. You can't ban a gun just because it's black. I'm going to talk a little more about the definition later. Another call that's been trotted out is that the police department need more money and more training. Here's another ludicrous attempt to weaponize the dead children for a preset agenda that people have. A few years ago, the Uvalde Police Department got $23 million in state funding for tactical gear, including vests. Every officer was issued a vest that is capable of stopping a rifle round from an AR-15. It didn't matter. They stood outside and stopped parents from going in who were willing to go in without the kit. I would have liked to seen some of the parents who happened to go there with their own weapons ask the cop, "Hey, can I borrow your tactical gear, your helmet, and your bulletproof vest and some of your other stuff? Because I'm going to go in and do something if you're not." And Texas taxpayers should get the $23 million back from the police department. Obviously, it didn't do any good. As far as training goes, I have an article here on recent training. Let me share this one. The Uvalde Police Department has been trained twice recently in this exact thing, in active shooter scenarios. They didn't follow their training. One of the training they did was an all-day training 2 months ago, which included drills in schools. They were in the hallway, they did scenarios, they did simulations of active shooters in schools. Here's a line here I just want to read. In their training, the short duration and high casualty rates produced by these events require immediate response to reduce the loss of life. In many cases, that immediate response means a single solo officer response until such a time as other forces can arrive. The best hope that innocent victims have is that officers immediately move into action to isolate, distract, or neutralize the threat, even if that means one officer acting alone. They've had 2 trainings in the last year, so they've had 23 million. More money, more training, that's not the problem. I'd like to talk about the fundamental principle here of what they're trying to do. So people are using this event, the Buffalo event, and going all the way back. Sandy Hook, Columbine, Pulse nightclub, the church shooting in Texas, the church shooting in Charleston. They have a predetermined agenda. They want to control. They want to ban firearms. They want to restrict our rights to keep and bear arms, our right to self-defense. And they'll weaponize dead children for it immediately. They didn't even wait until they found out really what happened or what the problem was. It looks like the man, I'm going to call him man because he was 18, the man in Texas who did the school shooting in Uvalde, he was a known problem. He had a history of things like beheading the cat, cutting his face, and going into school with his cut up face. I don't know if he was on SSRI medications or what, but I think you have to wait and find out what were his mental defects. There's obviously something wrong with him. The particular rifle he picked is not the problem. Even firearms itself isn't the problem. Somebody that wishes to do that could use another method. I'll just point out that the 2 massive killings in my lifetime, one is 9/11. They used airplanes. There's no firearms there. Another one, the biggest one in the US, the second biggest one after that, is the Oklahoma City bombing of a building, killed over 100 people. He didn't use a firearm either. Somebody that's crazy enough to do this, banning a particular model rifle or magazine size doesn't stop them. These things happen in other countries, and they can use other weapons. So the whole concept of what they're trying to do to fix the problem is wrong. They're not going to fix it that way. And I also like to point out that the biggest school mass killing in US history was actually also in Texas. It was done by the FBI at the Branch Davidians home school. I'll just leave it at that. But that's the biggest one I know of, biggest school killing. So I'm going to go through some slides I have here with some definitions. All right, I'm going to go through a couple definitions here. The first, of course, the Second Amendment. I'm going to read that. This was ratified in 1791. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, we talk about the operative clause of this is that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This is instruction to Congress, to the federal government, that they're not allowed to infringe on this right. There's some definitions here I want to go through. Whenever we're reading the Constitution, the amendments, we have to go back to the wording and the definitions at the time it was written. You want to understand the original intent of this and what it was about. So militia, that was defined as male, able-bodied between 18 and 45. It's all of the people that are healthy and able to do that. Male at the time. Now I would include some females that are capable, maybe all females, but it's all people. The militia is not the National Guard. The militia is not the Army. The militia is not the government. The militia is not any government employee. Another definition from the time is that it includes any male age 1845 that is not part of the government, not an office, not a holder of an office. So I think I would include police, state police, certainly National Guard. They've lost their position in the militia. They have a conflict of interest. They work for the federal government at this point. So the militia is the people. Arms, from a 1771 legal dictionary by Timothy Cunningham, arms is anything that a man wears for his defense, or takes into his hands, or useth in wrath to cast at or strike another. That's what they meant by arms in the second definition, Second Amendment. Bear means to carry. That's an easy English word. Bear just means to carry. When you say the right to bear arms, it's the right to carry. The word regulated, that's an interesting one, because often we hear people claim that means regulation, as in federal laws. Regulated, well-regulated, in the founders' use of the word, that means discipline and training. So a regulated militia is one that spends time training. In the 1700s, 1800s, that was a group of men at the time that would regularly drill in military tactics using their own weapons. They were disciplined, they were trained, and that's called well-regulated. Noah Webster, he's the dude who came up with the dictionary that we still often use. Another word in there is free state. What does it mean in the Second Amendment when they talk about a free state? That's I'm going to back up to this. Being necessary to the security of a free state. What Noah Webster defined that is, a free state is one where a standing army cannot rule because the people are well armed. That's a good definition. And quote from Noah Webster: the supreme power in America cannot enforce unjust laws by the sword because the whole body of the people are armed. We're getting into the reason for the Second Amendment, why the founders included it. It's a reminder to the federal government they're not allowed to infringe on the right to keep and bear arms. And the key reason for this was not hunting, it was not self-defense. To the founders, that was a given. Of course you can hunt or defend your property and your family from thieves and criminals and invaders. The primary reason for the Second Amendment is so that the citizens are protected from the government. The government cannot become tyrannical. The citizens are well armed. They were certainly talking about military grade weapons. Sam Adams on firearm rights. Among the natural rights of the colonists are these: first, a right to life; second, to liberty; third, to property, together with the right to support and defend them in the best manner they can. This is commonly called the first law of nature. This is Sam Adams in 1772. And I have one more definition here. This one's actually mine. I wrote this when last time the assault rifle ban was being trotted out. A assault rifle is a black semi-automatic rifle visually appearing similar to rifles used by the military and as Hollywood movie props, which often result in fear by those with no knowledge of firearms. I offered this up to, I think it was Congressman Pelosi and Congressman Brian Mast at the time, a few years ago. They were attempting to get another assault weapon ban through. Brian Mast happens to be the congressman from my district. He's one of the Rhino Republican types. So he's a quote unquote Republican who was trying to get Trump to ban assault rifles. So I offered this definition to him, but he never replied. They were attempting to ban assault rifles or assault weapons, but they can't define it. It's never really been adequately defined. That's why you see places like New Jersey where it's illegal to sell them. They have New Jersey compliant rifles. Maybe it can't be black or have a folding stock or some other cosmetic feature or handy feature. It can't have a pistol grip front. None of that has anything to do with how it shoots. And in Uvalde, the guy could have bought a 30-06 hunting rifle, and he had an hour and 20 minutes to kill 19 people. You could have a single load rifle and do that. Anyway, I offered up a definition, but they didn't use my definition. All right, so be it. I was going to quote from Scalia, and normally, as anybody's watched my show before, knows that the Supreme Court is far from the final word. They're just an opinion. But the Heller was an interesting case. That's the one where the Supreme Court affirmed the right to keep and bear arms is an individual right. It doesn't have to be from the militia. What Scalia wrote in that well-regulated means discipline and training, which I earlier said. And here's a quote from Scalia. It was understood across the political spectrum that the right helped secure the ideal of a citizen militia, which might be necessary to oppose an oppressive military force if constitutional order broke down. The threat the new federal government would destroy the citizens' militia by taking away their arms was the reason that the right was codified in a written constitution. So he's explaining why the founders included the Second Amendment. It was about protecting the citizens from the federal government. And they're even specifically about the federal government. At the time, they were not concerned about state governments. This is about the formation of the federal government. The Second Amendment is a restriction on the federal government. This is a relatively new thing that people claim it's incorporated on the states. I won't get into that today, but I'd like to talk about that later. Another thing I was going to read from Heller. This is from the syllabus. The anti-federalists feared the federal government would disarm the people in order to disable the citizens' militia. The response was to deny Congress power to abridge the ancient right of individuals to keep and bear arms. By ancient right, they're talking about they're talking about right that it goes way back. So I know what people mean usually when they say constitutional right or Second Amendment right, but there's no such thing. There's no such thing as a Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. There's no such thing as a Second Amendment right. There's no such thing as a constitutional right. I don't like that wording because it implies that the right comes from the words of that text. And if that text wasn't there, the right wouldn't exist. That's false. The right was around before the federal government was formed. It was around before 1791 when the amendment was ratified. The right is a natural right that humans have. It's part of the right to life, the right to defend it as best you can. So occasionally you may hear me object if somebody says Second Amendment right. I say there's no such thing. And the reason I'm bringing that up on the show is because people are demanding that the Second Amendment be repealed. Guess what? That does absolutely nothing legally because the Second Amendment is simply a reminder to the federal government that they can't infringe on the right. If the Second Amendment wasn't there, it wouldn't change anything about the authority that was delegated to Congress or the president. So no, there's nothing in the Constitution that allows the president to issue an executive order restricting rights, even though they do it all the time. Biden has done a dozen or more. Trump did some. Trump issued an executive order. He banned a piece of plastic in a spring, claiming that's an automatic weapon. And that he has authority to do that. Obama did too. These go way back. All right, I got my pocket constitution here. Article 1, Section 8 is where you have to go because, as I said, the Second Amendment is just a reminder. If they repeal that, it doesn't change anything. You still have to go back to Article 1 of the Constitution, Section 8, which defines all of the powers to Congress. As I've showed before in a show, it's a one-page thing. Doesn't take very long to read. Guess what? There's nothing in there. Congress has no power to make any regulations, any infringement on the right to keep and bear arms. It does not exist. therefore they can't do it legally. Every federal law related to infringing on that right is illegal, unconstitutional. I have a list of a few of them. These are all illegal. They're unconstitutional. What I would like to see is the states ignoring the feds on these. The National Firearm Rights, NFA, of 1934, that was the first regulation. It taxed and registered machine guns, short-barreled rifles, and shotguns, and suppressors. That's illegal. The Omnibus Crime Control and Safe Streets Act of 1968. That's the one that made the minimum age 21 for handguns throughout the U.S. That's unconstitutional. The Gun Control Act of 1968, that prohibits interstate firearms transfer except by licensed manufacturers and dealers. All sorts of mischief have come out of this. They claim they can do this under the Commerce Clause. Guess what, Congress? This is the opposite of what the Commerce Clause is. The Commerce Clause says that the federal government has the power to ensure commerce, to make sure that states don't attempt to violate Congress. Congress themselves did exactly the opposite of what the Commerce Clause is for in this law by setting up this transfer to state illegal unless you have a license from the feds. That's unconstitutional. The Firearm Owners Protection Act of 1986, the name is a lie like all other federal legislation. They name it the opposite of what the thing actually does. So the Firearm Owners Protection Act, it protects owners from firearms, from their own firearms. It bans sale of automatic firearms to civilians. So that was 1986. People talk about how did this country get along without that. That was 1986 that became completely, illegal. The Undetectable Firearms Act of 1986, as if firearms can't be detected because of this one thing, another dumb name or lie of a name, that criminalized the sale and manufacture of a gun with less than 3.7 ounces of metal. This is what makes the 3D printed gun so much fun. It's very easy to get around this one. The Gun-Free School Zone Act of 1993, that made no guns in a school zone. Guess what? All the school zone shootings happen in gun-free school zones, as if a sign stops a gunman. Like laws can fix this problem, and more laws will help. The Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act of 1993, that required a background check. That's the NICS system. Another amusing name and blatant lie. Handgun Violence Prevention Act. Like did that 1993 there was no handgun violence? I guess that's what that title means. By the way, that was a big NRA bill. They really pushed that through. But as Michael Bolden of the 10th Amendment Center has said, the NRA is the most effective gun control organization in U.S. history. They do believe in the big government. And I'm a member, by the way, and I have several NRA certifications, as they call it. But they're quite effective at gun control. They believe in big federal government. But I digress. Another law, federal assault weapons ban, that was 1994 to 2004. It expired because it didn't do anything. Basically, it banned semi-automatic rifles that sort of look like military rifles. You can't manufacture them for civilian use. It also banned large capacity magazines, as if that makes a big difference. If you look up the stats, which I'm not going to get into in this episode, but rifles and large capacity magazine rifles are not the preferred instrument of criminals. That isn't the tool that is used by criminals in any kind of significant numbers. It had a 10-year sunset. There was no measurable effect on crime, so they couldn't argue to repeat it. It was never challenged under the Second Amendment. I don't know why. It's a clear violation. So anyway, that long list, sorry to bore you with that long list of illegal, unconstitutional congressional acts that presidents signed all along the way. There's no expressly delegated authority in Article 1 of the Constitution to do that. There's nothing in Article 2 or Article 3 that authorizes the president or the Supreme Court to weigh in on this in any manner. They have no authority. Executive orders are unconstitutional. President Biden pushing for an assault weapon ban, quote unquote, that's an impeachable offense. It's certainly an affront to his oath of office. He's took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. That's part of an oath that congressmen, presidents take, Supreme Court justices. By calling for a ban on assault weapons, they're violating that oath. The Second Amendment is quite clear what that is. So conclusion here, repealing Second Amendment changes nothing legally. Per the 10th Amendment, gun control, gun restrictions are up to individual states, and individual states have widely varying gun restrictions and gun rights recognition. I live in Florida. Florida's pretty good. I used to live in New Jersey. New Jersey's horrible. New Jersey is one of the few states that does not have a constitutional amendment, a state constitutional amendment for the right to keep and bear arms. Florida does. Florida has a quite clear one. It's Article 1, Section 8 of the Florida Constitution is where you should go if you live in Florida and you're interested in the constitutional right to keep and bear arms, because it's the Florida one that matters, not the federal one. The federal one is a restriction on the federal government infringing on the right. And always keep in mind that the Second Amendment doesn't grant a right because governments don't grant rights. Governments can infringe on rights, governments can support rights, but they don't grant rights. That's what I mean when I say there's no such thing as a Second Amendment right. Even though I often or usually agree with people who use that phrase, the phrase itself is a admission or it certainly implies as a minimum that the federal government is in charge of this and that the right came from the Second Amendment. And if you repeal the Second Amendment, the right goes away. That's not how rights work. Government can't grant rights. All it can do is infringe on them or recognize them. And the right to keep and bear arms predates the government. It did not come from the government. We have the right. It's inherent in being human. It's a natural right. The Uvalde, Texas shooting and the calls to restrict gun rights are just another example of people weaponizing dead children to further their preset agenda. It's another example of you can't rely on the police. An hour and 20 minutes is a long, long time. You know, people call the police the first responders, the thin blue line. Well, in Uvalde, Texas, the thin blue line was the line between parents and their dying children. The police are second responders in most cases. First responders are the people on the scene. So remember, we are the first responders. Stay safe out there, folks. Bye for now.
Thanks for sticking around until the end. If you're new to Unsafe Space, check out our deep content library that includes discussions with everyone from James Lindsay to Brett Weinstein. And please consider helping to fund our work by visiting unsafespace.com/donate. You can find us on a variety of social media platforms, and you can find a community of like-minded individuals on our Unsafe Space Discord server, which is open to financial supporters at any level. We hope to see you there.
Warning. This is an unsafe space. Dangerous ideas have been detected. The content of this production does not meet WHO health and safety standards. Please report to a United Nations Sanitization Center immediately. Association with the following individuals is strictly prohibited. Experts who benefit from printing money agree that printing money does not cause price inflation. Trust me, just 2 more weeks to slow the spread of monkeypox. If you think about it, no one should be allowed to express opinions. But don't. Think about it, I mean. That's not your job. Thinking has been scientifically proven to be less efficient than compliance. Science, scientific, and scientifically are registered trademarks of the World Economic Forum. Unauthorized use is prohibited. Computer voice courtesy. Never mind, that last line is fake news. Please disregard it and return to your safe space immediately. There will be cake.